What's going on, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another video. In today's video, we're going to be covering TOEFL writing, both the integrated writing prompt and the independent writing essay. So please take out your notebooks, have your writing utensil in the palm of your hands, and get ready to take some outstanding notes. Let's go over to my laptop and look at the reading passage of the integrated writing question together. Let's take a look at the reading passage. We're going to first read the last sentence of the introduction paragraph, which is this sentence right here. Much of his criticism centered on the London specimen, the first complete skeleton of the bird, and the Berlin specimen, which was considered a better specimen than the former since it had a complete head. Okay, so the word criticism is hinting that the London specimen and the Berlin specimen are both suspicious, okay? And this criticism, his criticism, belongs to Fred Hoyle, who's a British scientist, okay? Now, the bird would be this word over here, Archaeopteryx, okay? So the reading's opinion is that the London and Berlin specimens are both suspicious, that their authenticity is in question. So the listening's opinion, the lecture's opinion is going to be, no, their authenticity is completely legit. Believe it, all right? Let's take a look at the first body paragraph. The London specimen was first found in Germany in 1861 and was later bought by the British National Museum of Natural History under the instruction of Richard Owen, a British biologist. Hoyle asserted this specimen was fraudulent, arguing that it was odd that the specimen was discovered only 2 years after Darwin's theories, blah, blah, blah. He accused Owen of having forged it to support Darwin's theory since Owen was a staunch evolutionist himself. Okay, so the reading's first reason is basically saying that the London specimen is quite suspicious because it was discovered only 2 years after Darwin's theory of evolution was published. And Fred Hoyle also believes that Richard Owen, who was the person that decided to purchase the London specimen, is a staunch evolutionist, so a strong believer, a firm believer in the theory of evolution. So Fred Hoyle believes that Richard Owen forged it. So forged it, made it up out of thin air, okay? It's not real. All right, now the second body paragraph. Hoyle also declared that both the London and Berlin specimens were too perfect to be true, especially when compared to the other fossils of Archaeopteryx known at the time. For example, the two specimens showed detailed evidence of feathers being present. However, the other fossils did not have such feathers, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so this part right here. Yeah, okay. So impressions of feathers made in a thin cement layer and therefore formed the main part of the forgery. Okay, so the reading's second reason is that the London and Berlin specimens were in too perfect of a condition to be real, since they even showed evidence of fossilized feathers, which is quite strange since no other fossils of the Archaeopteryx showed such details. Therefore, Fred Hoyle sincerely believes that those fossilized feathers were actually man-made impressions in a thin layer of cement. So it's basically fake. That's what Fred Hoyle and the reading passage believes. All right, now the last paragraph. Hoyle's final point rested on the limestone formations where the fossils were discovered. The fossils were found in blocks of limestone that had perfectly split into two pieces. One half of the fossil was perfectly preserved, but the other half was not. In addition, the two halves of the fossil did not match. Okay, so the third argument is stating that the limestone formations in which the London and Berlin specimens were discovered in are also quite suspicious because they were split in two perfect pieces. However, only one half was perfectly preserved and the other half was pretty much left to rot. And the most suspicious part of all of this is that when the two halves are put together, they don't even have the same size, or they don't even come together to form a complete fossil. And that's why Fred Hoyle believes that, yeah, the limestone formations are quite suspect. Okay, now, the level of difficulty of this TOEFL integrated writing prompt is very, very high. From my experience, I have not ever encountered a integrated writing question or prompt that was harder than this one. So if understanding the reading passage's information was difficult in itself, do not feel discouraged. Don't feel bad because, like I said, it's the most difficult TOEFL integrated writing prompt that I have and that I have personally encountered. All right, now let's listen to the lecture.
Now listen to a lecture on the topic you read about.
One of the more interesting controversies surrounding Charles Darwin concerns the fossils of the prehistoric Archaeopteryx found in Germany in the 19th century. While several papers were written in the 1980s by British scientist Fred Hoyle and others claiming these fossils were faked to support Darwin's theory of evolution, it's clear to me that these were not forgeries at all. First, the motives Hoyle gave for the forgery focus on Richard Owen, the scientist who prepared the fossils back in London. Hoyle claimed that Owen faked the fossils to support Darwin and his ideas. However, Owen was not an advocate of Darwin's model of evolution and therefore had no reason, none whatsoever, to support Darwin. Owen himself wrote a paper on the fossils that were found and, if the fossils had really been faked, he would have been risking both his career and credibility. Hoyle's claim that the feathers of the fossil specimens were made by impressions in cement is totally inaccurate. Hoyle was an astronomer, not a paleontologist, and he knew nothing about how fossils are created. In fact, the German limestone the fossils were found in is very smooth and has yielded many near-perfect fossils. This is true even for fossils showing the shapes of bird feathers. The existence of other fossilized feathers confirms that these specimens are real. Another argument Hoyle put forward was that the fossil in two sections was a fake because only one half of it had the bulk of the fossil. But this can happen if a dead animal falls onto a hardened surface and then gets covered in a layer of limestone. And the reason the two halves don't match is that one half was polished in order to make the details of the feathers clearer. Hoyle, however, was unaware of this fact.
All right, now let's look at the whiteboard and see what I actually took notes on. Okay, so the professor's opinion in this lecture was pretty simple. She got right to the point. Thank you very much. I'm going to add both of these words, okay? So the professor's opinion is that both the London and Berlin specimens were not faked and thus are not forgeries, okay? That's pretty much it. Very simple. Okay, now the first argument, the professor said that Richard Owen did not fake the London specimen because he actually was not an advocate of Charles Darwin's theory of evolution. As a result, Richard Owen had absolutely no reason to support the theory of evolution or Charles Darwin. Richard Owen actually wrote a paper on both the London and Berlin specimens himself, so if those fossils were actually faked, he would have been risking both his career and credibility, which clearly does not make any sense for a person who doesn't have any interest or personal interest in Charles Darwin's theory of evolution. All right, now the second argument states that Fred Hoyle's claims that the fossilized feathers are man-made is completely inaccurate. Now this is because Fred Hoyle was an astronomer and not a paleontologist. So he's a person who studies the stars and not fossils. So he knew nothing about how fossils are created. Plus, the German limestone, which was the limestone that these fossils were found in, is extremely smooth and has yielded perfect fossils before, or nearly perfect fossils before. Plus, there is evidence of other fossilized feathers. So once again, Fred Hoyle's assertions, implications, presumptions are completely incorrect. All right, let's move on to the last argument. Two halves of the same fossil not matching can happen if a dead creature falls on a surface and then gets covered by limestone. Now, the two halves actually did not match because scientists or paleontologists actually polished only one half to show more details, okay? So that it shows more details. However, Fred Hoyle was absolutely unaware of this truth, so he jumped to the conclusion and said that, yeah, the fossils must be fake because the two halves don't match or don't come together to complete a piece. All right, now that we know what I took notes on for this lecture, let's go back to my laptop and read my sample essay together. Okay, now before we look at my sample essay, I just want to remind you guys that my sample essays are like the answer sheets, okay? So in terms of the independent sample essays that I show you guys on this channel through my videos, you don't have to write as many words as I do, okay? On average, I type about 700 to 900 words for every independent essay that I personally type. Now, I type so many words so that I can show you a wide array of vocabulary and expressions, understood? Now, for the integrated writing sample essays, I'm basically writing almost all of the reading and lectures information. Now, I choose to write sample essays in this fashion so that you guys can see what you missed and what you misunderstood. Do you understand? So, I'm telling you that you're not expected to type essays like mine because it's too much. It's not what's expected, all right? Don't forget that this is a test on English as a foreign language. Okay, now let's look at my sample essay. The reading passage and lecture have conflicting opinions about whether or not Fred Hoyle's claims that the fossilized remains, the Berlin specimen and the London specimen, of an ancient bird called Archaeopteryx are a hoax. The article strongly postulates that these specimens had been faked in an effort to bolster Charles Darwin's theory of evolution. Bolster means to strengthen. On the other hand, the listening adamantly denies that both the London and Berlin specimens were not forgeries because of several compelling reasons. So I didn't even end up writing were not faked. Okay, now let's move on to the first body paragraph. First and foremost, according to the author of the excerpt, Richard Owen, a biologist, brought over the London specimen to the National Museum of Natural History just 2 years after the publication of Darwin's theory. This was suspicious to Fred Hoyle because the time it took to discover this fossil, and the time Darwin finished his theory was way too short, just 2 years. Thus, Hoyle believes that Owen must have forged the London specimen to strengthen Darwin's beliefs. Okay, so that was the readings information. Now here is the lecture's argument. Nonetheless, the lecturer offsets these points by declaring that Richard Owen could not have faked the London specimen because he was not an advocate of the theory of evolution from the start. In other words, there was no reason for Owen to support Darwin's theory. Plus, Owen personally wrote several papers on the fossil that he discovered, so if it were a fake, Owen would have been risking his own career and credibility for no logical reason. Now, after I took notes on the lecture, for the first argument, I did say that Owen wrote several papers on the fossils, but upon reviewing the readings information, the first body paragraph was only focusing on the London specimen, so I decided to type on the fossil instead of on the fossils, okay? All right, now let's move on to the second body paragraph, which starts with the lecture's information. So this is the lecture's second argument. On top of this, the professor in the listening further asserts that Fred Hoyle's claims that fossilized feathers prove the London and Berlin specimens' lack of authenticity are inaccurate. To start with, Fred Hoyle was an astronomer and not a paleontologist, meaning that he doesn't know exactly how fossils are created. The limestone in which these fossils remained is extremely smooth and has yielded perfect fossils in the past. Furthermore, numerous fossils have also displayed imprints of feathers in the past, so the existence of fossilized feathers proves that the London and Berlin specimens are most likely real. Okay, so let's move on to the reading's second reason and major detail. These claims refute the writer's implications of how the condition of said specimens is too good to be true, as feathers have never shown up in the fossilized remains of organisms before the London and Berlin specimens. All right, now the third and last body paragraph. This is the reading's third reason and major detail. The article lastly points out that the limestone formations of the London and Berlin specimens were perfectly split in two halves upon the time of their excavation. However, only one half was preserved in prime condition. Prime condition means perfect condition, whereas the other half was more or less ruined. Additionally, when trying to put these two halves together, Hoyle found out that they didn't match, appearing to give credential to his notion that these fossils had been faked. All right, now the lecture's last and third argument. The speaker in the lecture counters these indications by insisting that Something like this could happen if a dead animal dies and falls on a hard surface and later gets covered in limestone. Besides, only one half of the limestone was polished in order to make the details of the feathers much clearer. Hoyle was unaware and oblivious of this fact, so the London and Berlin specimens seemed even more doubtful due to his lack of knowledge. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that's my sample essay. Now let's move on to independent writing. All right, now the topic that I wanted to show you guys today is, which of the following values is the most important to share with a young child between the ages of 5 and 10? Now, I wanted to show you guys this essay topic because, to my knowledge, it came out 3 times in the real test. And one of my students right now has told me that this is an essay topic that was challenging to him or her, so I wanted to cover it in today's video. All right, now let's read my sample essay together. We're going to start reading from even though. Okay, this sentence right here, because everything here is the writing template. If you guys study the writing template properly and use it properly, none of these sentences should have any mistakes, so we're just going to skip it. Okay, so let's read from here. Even though some may adamantly believe that helping young kids between the ages of 5 and 10 realize the importance of being helpful and well organized is more important than sharing other values with them, I strongly think such opinion lacks coherence to some extent. So that was the unexpected twist, I guess. It was me typing out the other opinion. Okay, now here's my opinion. In my humble opinion, teaching children the value of being honest is the most important for the following reasons. Pretty simple, right? Okay, now let's move on to the first body paragraph. First and foremost, the majority of individuals would agree with the notion that most, if not all, kids between the ages of 5 and 10 develop the habit of lying to get out of trouble or get what they want, a detrimental habit that can last until they become grown-ups. Now let me highlight everything up until the body paragraphs example. Okay. The main reason behind this rationale is that children in this age group don't have much patience, are absolutely terrified of getting in trouble, and want to avoid punishments at all costs, making them turn to lies and dishonesty as a solution to their problems. In other words, if parents or other individuals don't educate these kids about the negative aspects of lying, they may become pathological liars who lie just for the sake of it. Okay, so that was the reason and the 2 details, okay? Here's the most important part, the example. Look at how long it is. Okay, so let's read it together. To illustrate more thoroughly, when my younger brother Jason was 6 years old, he discovered the concept of lying and started bending the truth whenever he had the opportunity. Bending the truth means lying. Back in the day, Jason got $7 from our parents every week as his allowance, which was more than enough for a child who was only 6 years old. However, his friends at school told him that they got $10 from their parents a week to tease him, a lie that started a terrible and vicious cycle. In order to increase his pocket money, Jason began telling our mom that he needed more money for school field trips and other materials he needed to study. My mother didn't suspect him of lying, so she carelessly gave him the extra cash he claimed he needed and didn't give it a second thought. Eventually, she found out that there were no school field trips and that all students were already given every material they needed in the beginning of the school year. Thus, she stopped giving him allowance altogether in order to teach him a lesson. But then, Jason started to secretly take money out of our parents' wallets so that he could buy snacks on his own and lied every time he got caught. This situation persisted until Jason was 11 years old, and it really wreaked havoc on the relationship between our parents and him. Wreaked havoc on means ruined. Fortunately, my parents and I were able to help him break this bad habit by having countless long conversations with him. Now, I don't have a younger brother. This was all completely made up. It was a fabrication. It was a fake story. But it is a story. It is an example that really delivers the message of how terrible and how disastrous lying can be to young children and how it can continue until they become adults. So it was very effective. All right, let's look at the ending statement. All in all, we can't and shouldn't overlook the fact that young kids are very susceptible to the temptation of lies, meaning that they should be told early on that they should not lie. Now, an ending sentence, I recommend you guys to type something like this at the end of each body paragraph because I have seen many students go off topic as they're typing the example in their body paragraphs. So when and if that does happen, you need to type a sentence like this at the end to bring everything back to the topic that you're actually typing or writing. Okay, let's look at the second body paragraph. Okay, so this is the second reason and details. On top of this, sharing the values of being helpful and well organized isn't obligatory for kids who are still very young, a widely accepted fact in contemporary society. In the eyes of many people in present-day society, the education system already does a great job at teaching young students the significance of helping each other and organization. Okay, now actually you don't need this sentence here, so let me get rid of that. Okay, needless to say, the advantages of teaching young kids to be truthful far outweigh those of teaching them the other two values. Okay, so the main point of my second body paragraph is that being helpful and being well organized are values that are already covered in school by teachers, advisors, and maybe even classmates or upperclassmen. So being truthful is something that's way more important because it's not something that you can actually pick up as a young child in your daily life. All right, here's the second example. It's once again the longest part in the second body paragraph because it is the most important. A great example of this would be schools. In preschool, each and every child is taught on a daily basis to assist one another, as it is kindergarten teachers' responsibility to implant cooperation, and teamwork into their students' minds. Kids in preschool do group projects or activities almost every single day and are more or less forced to practice organizing their possessions as soon as they come to school. Young students have to keep their own cubbies very neat because their teachers check the condition of their cubbies after school and give them a grade. After students come of age and start attending middle or high school, they inevitably learn the values of being helpful and well organized through classes and extracurricular activities, including but not limited to sports, music, and art. Playing team sports is all about collaboration and acting in concert to achieve a mutual goal. All general subjects in school place a huge emphasis on being well organized both mentally and physically, owing to the fact that all students need to follow a set schedule and do school assignments by the due date. As we can see, attending school naturally educates students about the importance of being helpful and organized. There it is. Now here's the ending statement for the second body. Long story short, it's clear as day to me that people need to make a conscious effort to tell young kids about the significance of being truthful because the other two values mentioned in this essay topic are already covered in school. There we go. Now, for the conclusion paragraph, we only have to check this. The value of being honest is the most important for young children between the ages of 5 and 10. That sounds and looks perfectly fine, which is our opinion. We just have to check that this sentence in the conclusion paragraph is a complete sentence and something that makes sense. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that wraps up today's video. Being honest is definitely my opinion here. If you guys enjoyed the sample essays and what you saw in this video, please don't forget to drop a like in this video. Subscribe to the channel if you still have not done so. Comment if you have any questions, and please share with your close friends and family members that someone like me is doing something like this on YouTube. Now the next video is going to be covering TOEFL independent speaking. So if those questions, if the independent speaking questions are giving you a lot of trouble, stay tuned and be sure to check out the next video. Peace out, guys.